This is the third in our series of Seminar on Self, and I'm your philosopher at large, Tristan McGough. And today we're going to consider the paths of self-transformation. Just as the last time we considered the process of self-transformation, its twofold aspects of self-realization and self-cultivation leading to self-transformation. And before that, we dealt with the fruits of self-transformation. And the reason I did that, of course, is to show what the purpose is for all of this. What's the purpose of self-transformation? Well, it's to attain happiness. To eliminate the conditions of suffering in your life and to attain happiness, or what the Greeks called eudaimonia, consists of four things: enlightening mind, endearing heart or love, empowering will, and emancipating life by what you do. So, the process for attaining these transformative states of the psychophysical self, or the personality, if you will, starts with realizing the 10 dimensions of self, which we went over, then cultivating them in the 4 different gardens of wisdom, virtue, serenity, and skill. And if you would, take a look here at the gardens of self-cultivation and their fruit. The goal, of course, is happiness, and that's attained through having an enlightening mind in which you attain wisdom and insight into the world, your life in it, and the greater life surrounding us all. As well as the other 4, or the other 3 gardens of the 4, including virtue or character, which is built through your empowering will, as well as the serenity and bliss that you attain through your endearing love, often called the heart. And then there is the skill and power that is attained as permanent fruit, leading to emancipating life for yourself and for those whom you touch. This is the process of self-transformation, where boredom and banality, the mundane and mediocre, are transmuted in the cauldron of conscious awareness into the discovery of truth, beauty, goodness, and power. We spoke of the key to unlocking this conscious awareness with the tool of thought. I am conscious of being conscious. I want to make a note here. The Sanskrit word mantra consists of 2 root words, man and tra. Now, man means thought in Sanskrit, and tra means tool or device. So a mantra is a tool for thought. It helps to regulate your mental content and direct your thinking. It's similar to the Sanskrit yantra, which some of you may be familiar with from the yarn, meaning to sustain or support. So a yantra is a visual device or tool for sustaining or supporting your meditation, as a mantra is most often an auditory device. Lastly, a related word, tantra. Tantra comes from the root tan, which means to expand or to stretch. And so Tantra is a tool or a set of tools, theories and practices, being part of it, used to expand consciousness into its many dimensions. What you are here and learning, therefore, can be used for your own personal Tantra, your unique way of consciously expanding into the world in all its finite and infinite dimensions. Your personal path of self-transformation is your customized application of the tools, techniques, and practices, exercises, and acts which actualize the process of self-transformation for you as a unique self, thereby yielding the fruit of self-transformation. By continually employing what we shall call the awakening mantra of I am conscious of being conscious, you will open the mental door to viewing the 10 dimensions of yourself. Remember, as Buddhiraja has said, the method of attaining the goal is to be constantly awake to one's own awareness. When walking through that awakened door, you practice mindfulness, and you pay attention to one, several, and eventually all of the varying dimensions of yourself, all 10 of them, however they modulate their different frequencies with their diversified content. Paying close attention to one's contents of consciousness leads to discovering the ground of uninterrupted consciousness that makes possible the flashes of awareness you have in the differential frequencies as sensations, emotions, thought, intention, considerations, recollections, imaginings, volitions, etc. The one abiding, though ever-changing reality underlying your states of consciousness and all their diverse contents is your intractable sense of consciousness being identical with itself. This sense of selfhood, intelligible and articulatable as I am, is an everlasting endurance in your consciousness. In fact, it is felt as the most self-evident axiom in your life, this I am. When you activate your sense of I am by unsealing its potential to become awake to its own power through the awakening mantra, you have raised consciousness exponentially. You have taken the power of consciousness and, in mathematical terms, squared it. I'm going to repurpose Einstein's celebrated formula E equals mc squared. That is, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Conceding that mass is congealed, concretized energy, however, I'm here equating the speed of light, the scientifically determined limit of the universe, at least its rate of expansion or radiation, symbolized as c. I'm going to associate that with consciousness. In essence, successful mindfulness gathers the cognitive mass of the sum of your physical body's sensations, your emotional body's affections, and your mental body's thoughts, and multiplies these by the conscious light of self-reflection, which is the squaring of your awareful consciousness by your awakened consciousness, thereby yielding and releasing the energy for self-transformation. Your individual path of self-transformation is the unique way you convert the contents of your consciousness into the fruits of your individual happiness. However, to understand what the contents of consciousness are that you utilize for transformation along the path, we need to first take a look at what consciousness is. Consciousness consists of 5 primary modes, all of them happening at once, with most of their complicated contents being concealed while each person focuses on some particular sight or sound, feeling or thought, desire or deed that occupies their attention. While something is revealed to the person's attention, What is not revealed is concealed. This paying attention to something while not paying attention to the rest of everything else is captured in a common adage, out of sight, out of mind. We experience segments of reality at the cost of not experiencing everything else. Such is the nature of finite conscious being. However, what we do experience of the world, we attend to through ourself by way of consciousness in its 5 forms. The capacity to attend to things, to pay attention to something, whether externally aroused or internally generated, is what is termed liminal consciousness. Your everyday consciousness of things that you're aware of, such as being aware of my words right now, or maybe the call of somebody across the room. In brief, one's liminal consciousness is whatever one is awarefully attending to at any given moment. And its contents are always subject to change. What we have already been aware of, because we've experienced it as part of our past, is collected under a veil of subliminal consciousness, where most of the consciousness lie, like a submerged iceberg, either as part of what the Freudians called the preconscious or as part of the unconscious. Now, the preconscious is what we can readily access, like the name of your first pet or the sum of 2 plus 2. The unconscious contains, like the preconscious, contents of past experiences and past learnings. However, the unconscious includes many contents that may never surface. Some of these are too painful to recollect and are consequently repressed in order to preserve liminal order, though not necessarily interliminal harmony. Some unconscious content are confabulations born from connections consciousness makes without coming to the brink of superficial liminal consciousness for a breath of air in the sunshine of awareness. Consciousness can create without awareness that it has. The unconscious, like the body, has a lot of automatic processes and functions serving to determine and regulate the functioning of its system. But here, the system is the mind rather than the body. We'll speak more of these aspects of consciousness at another point in our series, as well as the contents of supraliminal consciousness, where the basic 5 modes of consciousness become the transformational engines to generate spiritual evolution. For the nonce, let's take a look at consciousness and its 5 modes of intuiting, willing, thinking, feeling, and doing, or living. For to do anything at all is to be alive. All 5 have different ways of functioning that are nevertheless based on a single ground of consciousness, represented by the all-inclusive circle. This is consciousness in terms of its 5 different modes, intuiting, encompassing them all, willing, thinking, feeling, and doing, as aspects of what often people think of as the mind and the heart and perhaps the character, and of course life. And this is consciousness per se. However, the ground of consciousness is something together altogether. Now remember that these are just visual aids and graphic representations of intangible forces and faculties. We can speak only metaphorically about circles of feeling and doing, and these being enclosed by a greater circle of the ground of being, or the ground of consciousness. As innate, they can help organize our thoughts and present our theory and direct our efforts of transformation. Now, the ground of consciousness, or pure consciousness, is consciousness without any particular content whatsoever. As Buddhist epistemologists assert, pure consciousness is that which is clear and knowing. All right, this is the diagram for the ground of consciousness, and the ground of consciousness, of course, as the Buddhist epistemologists have said, is clear and knowing. Now, the ground has both a state and a process. The state of the ground of consciousness is clear because it is free of all contents, being untainted, stainless, unadulterated, unmixed, free of property, quality, sign, mark, or blemish. Because the state of the ground of consciousness is clear of any possible obstruction, the process of the ground of consciousness is unobstructed knowing. And unlike that which lacks the power of consciousness, it cognitively grasps whatever its contents are directly. How does consciousness grasp its contents directly? Let's look at the nature of consciousness in order to answer our question. The nature of consciousness, of course, is where intuiting encompasses every one of its modes, whether it's willing, thinking, feeling, or doing. By intuition, intuition is the fundamental nature of consciousness in its other modes. As such, it has, like the ground of consciousness, a state and a process. The state of the nature of consciousness, or intuition for short, is consciousness beholding itself. Immanuel Kant referred to this mode of consciousness as apperception. Further, and as a complement, apperception is the power or force of consciousness to know what it knows as content directly, without intermediary, sign, or further connection, and to know it incorrigibly, irrefutably, incontrovertibly, irremediably, as a self-evident, self-authenticating, self-certifying experience. The state of intuition gives one their axiomatic sense. We referred to that at the end of our last presentation. That's the central sense of intuition. That's the sense of one's self-evident experiences, which form the irrefutable axioms by which you measure all other objects experienced as contents of consciousness. For intuition is at once the clarity of knowing and the certainty of knowing directly. Therefore, the process of the fundamental nature of consciousness, or intuition, is to immediately, instantaneously experience some content by way of one of the four primary forms of intuition, which are willing, thinking, feeling, and doing. Consciousness intuits what it wills, what it thinks, what it feels, what it senses. Consciousness intuits it directly. As for willing, you know just what you want and the goals you set to strive for. And no one but you experiences the willpower to do such and such, called volition, or not to do anything at all, which is called nolition. You're the one who experiences your will to do something when it arises within you. Nobody else lives your resolutions, vows, commitments, just you. As for thinking, you intuit your thoughts directly without anyone else's mind interfering in your thinking process or anything exterior forcing you to think in some way rather than in another. You watch your thoughts arise within your own mental space, formlessly floating until your inchoate cognitive cloud takes some shape that is ultimately subject to liminal dispersion, disappearing from your thought process altogether, like all the other thoughts before. This is not the case. And as for your feelings, there is nothing closer to your experience than the emotions and sentiments that captivate your entire attention with vibrancy and lived resonance. With feelings, you experience consciousness as what it feels like to have been. Now, consider what you do in life. You're doing. To live is to have the capacity to act in many ways, many of them subconscious, or what we're calling subliminal. The ways we do or live out our lives include our fundamental drive for life, as well as our urges, our habits, and individual deeds. Now, I'm going to take you from two-dimensional representation here into three-dimensional representation with the constituents of consciousness as the field of awareness. And here, what we're going to deal with is, you'll notice that here I've interjected what's an octahedron, really, and that's going to come in very handy for our later explanations of the spiritual, solar, and somatic realms, also known as the personal and often the psychic or the psychological, and then the spiritual, or some call the pneumatic. You'll see that the aforementioned apperception is the crown of the diagram, here represented as apperceiving, as with everything else, in terms of it being in the present sense of a verb. You are apperceiving now. You are aware of yourself now. It's not something you need to become aware of. It's something that's going on at this moment, and it's the basis of all your experience as it is of mine. And at the opposite end, instead of self-perceiving or self-consciousness, you have other consciousness. That's where you're apprehending objects under a dualistic subject-object dichotomy. You'll see in this diagram that apperceiving as the crown of this diagram it represents the transparency and reflexivity of consciousness as it knows itself in its state of being clear and knowing. That is, of consciousness effortlessly, directly knowing itself as a unitive type of knowledge. Its polar opposite is apprehending. In apprehension, there's a dualistic type of knowledge, where a subject, a consciousness, is epistemically related to an object of consciousness. Whether externally through the 10 senses, remember, 5 active and 5 passive, or through the direct intuition of one's interior states, that is, knowing internally what one is willing, thinking, feeling, or doing. So, we're going to move on here to looking at what are the contents of consciousness now that we understand a little bit better of things that are occurring within the realm of the mind by way of intuiting and things we're apprehending as objects either in our external environment or our internal world. And at the basis of all of it, we are directly aware that we are aware. Everything is perfectly mirrored and reflected in the ground of consciousness. Nothing is left out. However, in the contents of consciousness, we see that there is the experiencer, which is each of us, as that ground, which is aware that we are aware. We're simply reminding ourselves, we're articulating that, and we walk through the mental door of liminality when we use the awakening mantra, I am conscious of being conscious. And then we realize as an experiencer that we're both a watcher and an actor, right? We're an observer of everything that happens, but at the same time we're an agent, we're an actor. We're a mover, we're a doer, we're a shaker. That's the basis of everything that's going to occur within this wider circle. And under that, we have our direct experiences, and that's our conscious content. Now, under our conscious content, we have two elements, temperament and perspective, and they relate to the character. We'll go into those later on, as well as attitude and behavior. And attitude and behavior belong to the realm of the personality. The character is more enduring, more abiding. It's a more permanent structure to the psyche, where the personality is a set of masks and roles which are donned for particular situations. However, as we said, intuition experiences whatever we will think, feel, or do. There are various kinds of things that go to make these up, and we'll attend to those a bit later. But whereas for willings, thinkings, feelings, and doings of consciousness are strictly internal states and processes of the mind or psyche, sensings are not strictly internal, but become a phenomenal experience through the body's senses. We will speak later of the trigonic constitution of consciousness as personality, psyche, and pneuma, in which the physical body, as well as the emotional and mental bodies, are parts of the personality. But for now, know that the 10 dimensions of self as presented are components of the personality, the everyday you, with your acts of will, thought, feeling, and life, including your bodily sensations. Regarding your sensing, these, like the strictly internal contents of your psyche, are yours and yours alone. Only you have the individual sights you see, the sounds your inner eardrum picks up to hear your unique audio takes on atmospheric pressure waves, open to those with ears to hear in their own unique way. The sensations arising from touch, those are yours. The odorants forming in your nostrils as smells, those are yours. The tastes are yours, that only you experience in your mouth because of taste buds and tasty food. These are passive sensia, bodily sensations arising from external stimuli. However, sensing is not just a passive affair, as we well know. There are also active senses that allow you, as a human, the powers of locomotion by your feet, manipulation by your hands, speech through your vocal cords, procreation through your genitalia, and elimination through your bowels. No one has to tell you when you're doing any of these things. You know it intuitively by the active sensia of your bodily experience. Well, here's a Fuller diagram representing the nature of experience. Once again, we have the experiencing agent as the ground of consciousness, the ground of everything, which I have as an all-inclusive circle, but I put it at the ground in order to call attention that it actually is the basis of all experience, that is, the experiencer, who is the watcher and the actor. Take a close look at that. That's the ground of consciousness. And as a watcher, you have three aspects I mentioned the trigonic self. This is the first inkling and introduction to it. In your everyday empirical experience, the experience of your personality in its 10 dimensions, you're an observer. But you're also a performer in that empirical experience. You're certainly able to perform certain roles, perform certain functions, and to perform in certain physical, social, communal, artistic, technical, and other acts. On the next level, which relates specifically to your psyche or to your soul, as it's been called, is the reflector in your epistemic experiences. That's the ability to behold the things we're talking about. When we're talking about realization of yourself, we're talking about your power of self-reflection, your ability to reflect on yourself and your contents of experience. All of these things. You have that ability as a reflector. And co-founded with that, you are a mentator. Mentation is a form of acting. That is part of you as an actor. You don't just perform through your body and bodies. You are a mentator. That is, you are epistemically engaged at a psychic level, at an internal mental level, where you are generating thoughts, feelings, volitions, and actions as a mentator. Later, you may perform some of those. Just like later, the things you've reflected on, you may observe in your environment. At the basis of everything is the illuminator. That is self-consciousness. Consciousness is, as it's often been compared, the flame that disperses the darkness. You have a dark room. All of a sudden, you turn on a flashlight, you flick on the lights, or you light a candle. Where does the darkness go? Analogously, consciousness is light. And when turned on, it is self-generating. It is the originator of all experience. We'll get into those more later on in the seminar on self. They're key items. But it's important to be introduced to them now, because the experiencer in its dual nature as both a watcher and an actor is ever present. At the opposite end is the experience, and that's through our bodily contact. You're always in contact with something. Consciousness, liminal consciousness, is always in contact with some object of experience, some content of experience, whether that is actually through one of the senses or through reflection on what is it I'm thinking, what am I feeling, what am I doing or about to do, etc., etc. The experience itself, and we went over these, we won't do it again. 5 passive senses, 5 active senses. And to expand now and end our seminar for today, we're going to take a look at a fleshed out version of what might be called the structure of your contents of experience consciousness. And here you're going to see what I had referred to before as the temperament and the perspective. And these relate more to the character. And these relate to your personality. These relate more to your soul. These relate more to your everyday involvement in this world. And so, from the angle, they're radical imprints. Now, the Hindus call them samskaras. They are deep impressions. And they become motivational predispositions. Everything you've ever experienced is grouped in your consciousness in one way or another, and you've experienced in these various circles or buckets, if you will. But in terms of your temperament, the things that are more enduring and the things that orient you in the world are basically four. They're your firm temperament, which is your regulative imprint set. They're the imprints that have formed in such a fashion that they regulate everything else your consciousness does. And from the angle of your will, it's aim. Do you have a sense of purposefulness in life or aimless? What is your aim? Is there some purpose in life, or is there nothing for you? That is crucial in determining the structure of whatever you will in your life. Just as view is crucial to what you will think, and mood to what you will feel, and drive to what you will do. View is basically, do you see the world as a harmonious place, a cosmos? Or do you see it as disordered, disheveled, and random? Do you see it as chaos? That's your view. And that's going to shape all the other contents of your consciousness. Your mood is fundamentally optimism versus pessimism. Are you an optimist or are you a pessimist? Are things going to turn out for the better or the worse? Lastly is your drive. You either have strength or you feel helpless in the world. That determines the way you will apply your efforts and all the deeds and actions that you'll ever do, is that fundamental drive. So this is your temperament, your drive, your aim, your view, your mood. These are the things that, if you will, are rock solid, and it takes a lot to transform them. They're the deepest set of things that you'll lastly transform. Next is your perspective, and that's your functional imprint set. That's the way you, as a conscious being, a soul, a psyche, if you will, take a look upon the world, and the way you look upon the world is always a structured way. So they're your functional imprint set. And so here you have your commands, which are your conative compulsions. They're your will compulsions. They're the things that you feel compelled to do in life. It might be to serve your family. It might be to serve your government. It might be to serve your country. It might be to serve your God. These are the things that you feel are motivating imperatives in your life. And as you can see, they're pretty strong, and they're not easily changed. Like the temperament, they're rather fixed, and that's why they're radical imprint. And they're motivational predispositions. They predispose you to do this. So, those are matched, of course, by your opinions with your thinkings, and that's your cognitive fixations. You're usually given these by way of indoctrination, through education, through religion, through political ideology, through demagoguery, through all kinds of sorcerers and hypnotists, particularly the ones on television, because they are the ones that are adept at making apprentices of us all. Passions are your appetitive, obsession. Urges are your physical addiction. Now, these addictions can be everything from your need to breathe the next full lung of air, or it can be a chemical dependency, whether it's on sugar, caffeine, or any other. However, in your everyday life, you have empirical impulses. Hindus call these vasanas. These are your motivational dispositions. They don't predispose you to do something. They sort of incline you to act every day in a particular way. You got certain things that form your attitude. And your attitude are four things: commitments, beliefs, sentiments, and habits. And as you can tell, of course, these relate here. So if we take a look at your commitments, those are your vow resolutions. And they can be everything from, you can take religious vows, marital vows, vows to your company, sign a contract, give your word. These are all your commitments. Then, in terms of your thinkings, and I've got technical words for these too, but for the time being, let's just go with the standard English. For your thoughts or your thinkings, there are beliefs, and those are your mental assumptions. These are handed you from elders and from peers and from textbooks and other authorities. Sometimes you sift through the contents and you find logical inconsistencies and reject certain assumptions, and sometimes you do not. And whether they're checked or they're unchecked, your beliefs or your mental assumptions, just like your commitment, are the assumptions you make with your will. And of course, those are contrasted with your sentiments, which are your emotive inclination. And these sentiments, like beliefs, are layered, just like commitment. Everything is layered, sedimented, one on top of another within these various circles or faculties of function. And then lastly are your ingrained reactions, your habits. So those constitute your attitude. Now, your behavior, what you actually do, like what I'm doing right now, this is a deed. Okay? But I have certain emotions that I have certain thoughts, and I have a certain intent. For instance, I might have a pedagogical intent, or I might have a discursive, or I might have just an intent to get to the end of this. But I have an intent. And so that's your behavior, and that's your ostensible impulse set. These are things that you can observe. You observe people's deeds, right? And you can usually say, oh, they look mad, right? You can see an emotion. It's usually flashed across the face or some other form. And it's the way with the other things. So since we've went through that, your own individual path of transformation is going to be taking these contents and converting them through this process of awakening, so that what you pay attention to is going to have more and more value and enrich your life. So there's a lot to take in here. I understand that. You needn't memorize any of this, but for the time being, I just want you to get the general idea so that you can do your own discovery, your own research in your own dimensions. As you're realizing these 10 dimensions, let's do an exercise here for next week, where, well, today, and practice during the next week or month, however you do it. And this is to deepen the mindfulness that we discussed last time, where, of course, you attend to something, you notice new elements, right? You remind yourself when your consciousness is broken from attempting to be mindful of what it's doing in one of its facets, one of its 10 dimensions. All right, so what we're going to do is, for our deepening of mindfulness, we're going to do a consciousness exercise today, and we're going to develop further what was initially those 4 elements of mindfulness. So what we're going to be studying this time is the cycle of birth, abiding, aging, and death. All 4 things are happening in the moment, right? There's something new that's happening right now. There's something old that has died. There's something that is aging, whether it's the scarf. And there's something that's abiding, whether it might be the visual portrayal of me and the continuity. But all 4 things, birth, aging, abiding, dying, happening right now, here. So, what we're going to do is we're going to look at that cycle from arising through abiding to decaying and disappearing. We're going to be mindful of analyzing the cycle of bodily sensations as they arise, persevere, then diminish and die, as well as the sensations. We're going to be paying attention to your actions, deeds, habits, urges, and drive. Be mindful by noticing your emotions, sentiments, passions, wishes, fears, anticipations, hopes, and desires as they arise, continue, then dissipate. Be mindful by investigating your thoughts as they form, then float in your space of awareness until displaced. Be mindful by discovering your willed intentions, resolutions, determinations, vows, and commitments. Be mindful by witnessing the interval between sensations, emotions, thoughts, and acts of will. And be mindful by recalling the mind back to full attention whenever it wavers, is distracted, or disrupted for any reason. Well, that was a lot for today. We'll continue next time, and we'll be looking at some of the obstructions to the path of transformation, and that will help you get a clear idea of defining what your unique path is. So until then, behave when you must. Be good whenever you can, but above all else, be yourself.